Ladies and gentlemen, so today I got a treat for you. So I talked to Chris, aka the Modern Diver. Wow, what a conversation. I want to say this is the longest conversation I've had with somebody. This conversation went about an hour plus. I want to say an hour, 10 minutes or so. It's just a bunch of things that I didn't know about diving and that I didn't even care to research, but it's so interesting that when he's telling me, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. We talked about his deepest dive and the hottest subject right now first of all, I should have mentioned this in the beginning. He's from Canada. I think Ontario, Canada. I'm thinking he said, yeah, but he was telling us about what's going on up there, but the main subject of the conversation was his diving and his training and all that. So, without further ado, I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary folk and others. I present to you Chris, also known as the Modern Diver.
There we go. Hello.
How's it going, Chris? Chris, right? Did I get that right?
Yes, correct. My name is Chris.
I'm sorry. Here you go. I'm sorry. All right. First of all, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, who you are, and all that interesting stuff that we're going to talk about.
Perfect, for sure. So my name is Chris. I am mostly known online as Moderndiver. So I've got TikTok is my main platform. I've also got YouTube, Instagram, and kind of the whole social media suite there. Myself, kind of as a background, I am a recreational scuba instructor, and I'm also certified in technical decompression diving as well as cave diving techniques. I've worked in the dive industry myself for about 10 years now, and I've been an instructor for about 5 years, and I've always enjoyed sharing my diving adventures and video and stuff with family and friends. And then about a year or two ago, I'd been throwing around the idea of starting up Moderndiver for a while now, and kind of at the start of the pandemic, kind of tail end of 2019, early 2020, it was kind of like, oh, you know what, I've got a bit more time to work on this and polish it out. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. So under the Moderndiver name, like my bio usually says dedicated to educating modern scuba divers. So I really try to tailor my gear or my footage towards both those who are certified, those who are not certified yet looking to get into it, as well as helping tailor those in the advanced levels of diving if they have questions about different levels of diving, because as I've mentioned, I'm quite experienced in a lot of it. But yeah, that's kind of a quick summary of who I am and what I do.
Awesome. Okay, let me tell you who I am, a little bit of myself first. I'm Oscar. I started R2 right around probably the same time when you started this. I'd say December 2019.
Okay.
The process, I haven't taken it as serious as you have because it's only like a side thing that I'm doing, and I'd hope to get good at it eventually. You know what? If you know what I mean when I say get good at it,
yeah.
right? But other than that, I'm a construction worker. That's pretty much what I did. Before I started in construction, I used to work just warehouses. And I would, I would always wonder, how do these people do it? How do these people get good at creating content? Because it seemed fun, and that's pretty much all I've done. As far as a sports, anything like that, I've stayed away from that. Other than just staying at the gym, going to the gym, and trying to eat healthy, and that's pretty much me.
That's all right. Nothing wrong with that.
Right. I'm just an average Joe, I would say. You're a little bit more than average than I am, because you're doing something really, really awesome. Like, I have never, ever in my life met anybody or talked to somebody that does what you do.
Fair enough. And that's why I'm here, right? And that's why, it's an interesting industry, and especially as we talk about it, you'll kind of learn a little bit more. But believe it or not, like, we're all surrounded by divers, and like, I guarantee the more it's always funny when you talk to a new student who's just starting to get into diving, because it's not until they're about halfway through their course and they've started to tell their friends and family that they're going to become a certified scuba diver, and then they find out that a bunch of their aunts and uncles or friends or coworkers have all been divers at some point in the past, but not a lot of divers really stick with it, which is a shame. A lot of divers will get into it as a touristy thing or on vacation or kind of a kind of a fling in their life for a few years, and then they kind of fall off to the side of it. So there's definitely not as many of us that are up here in the higher end of diving. But one of the things that really pushed me to start Modern Diver was to help educate, especially people like our age, like just the younger generation, to get into the sport of diving. Because back in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, back in the golden age of Jacques Cousteau and all that stuff, he really inspired a whole generation of divers. And then right around kind of the early 2000s to 2010s, there's a bit of a disconnect there where there's a big age group gap in the industry right now, where you've got these kind of older generation divers, and then you've got some newer age people that kind of got into it, starting around 2010 to now. But again, a lot of them get into it in this touristy way, and they don't always have a goal to set. And it's really, really rewarding to get into some of the higher end levels of diving, like I do. Like we do a lot of shipwreck diving and cave diving and stuff, kind of all around the world. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it already yet, but I'm based here in Southern Ontario, so I'm in Niagara. I'm only about maybe 10 minutes away from Niagara Falls, but we are located pretty much right in between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie.
Right.
And the biggest things for us here is the shipwrecks, and diving the shipwrecks and seeing the shipwrecks in the Great Lakes is something that a lot of people really don't get to see, experience, or even really know about. So it's pretty interesting. Like where are you located?
I'm in California.
Oh, okay, all right. So yeah, you're down in California there, and you've
West
got
Coast.
some really unique diving yourself, right? So I've been to California before. Go ahead.
Oh, I said I'd be interested in doing it, but it's really scary. It's unknown. You can't see what's coming. You're out of your element.
You can be out of your element. Like a couple years ago, we went to Catalina Island. So we drove Catalina Island off the coast of San Francisco there. So that's diving like in the kelp forests with the sea lions and stuff, which was really, really cool. And then in October of 2019, I was down in San Diego, and we did a dive charter through Nautilus Liveaboards, which is it's actually a Canadian company, but they have a headquarters in San Diego. And basically, we got on a bus and we crossed over the border into Mexico, took an hour bus ride down to a boat, and we spent 5 days off the coast of Guadalupe Island diving with the great whites, which was absolutely
Was that cage
phenomenal.
or free diving?
That was cage. So Guadalupe Island is it's a marine sanctuary. So it's an uninhabited island off the coast of Mexico in the South Pacific. That the only thing on there is like a small Mexican military scientific base, but it's super regulated as far as like going to that area, because the great whites are only in that area for a few months of the year. So for the majority of the year, there's no sharks there. But when you go there between September and December, you've actually got they estimate about 70% of the great white South Pacific population flocks to Guadalupe Island. And they're not even really sure why. They think it could be to do with mating, or different kind of reasons like that. Like they're still really trying to learn it. But this area is it's a marine sanctuary. So there's a lot of really strict rules and limits to how many boats can be there and what we're doing on the boats, and whether or not we're interfering with the wildlife in a sense. But that trip was well worth it. We had to book that trip over 3 years in advance, and it wasn't cheap. It cost me like probably $5,000, but we spent over 14 hours underwater, cage diving with great whites. Collectively, we saw anywhere, I think the crew had estimated we saw about 21 unique great white sharks, and the largest one we saw was about 19 feet.
See that right there is why I think people don't stick around that sport, because it sounds expensive.
It can be expensive, but it's really interesting, and it depends on the type of diving you're doing, right? Like, so going into just the sport as a whole, right? So
just what you do. Let's talk about what you do. So I want to see where you're at, like
where I'm at comparatively, right?
Yeah. Compared to where I would be if I was doing it right now, let's say then.
For sure. So so things like that, like those kind of big expedition style trips, those can be quite expensive. But being able to plan it and book it ahead of time, like we booked that trip about 3.5 years in advance. So it gave me over 36 months in a sense to plan for it and budget for it and different things like that. Being here in Southern Ontario around the Great Lakes means that diving is significantly cheaper sometimes. For example, if I'm doing just like a shore dive, I already own all my equipment. I can just drive to the water's edge. Cost me maybe $6 to get an air fill, to fill my tanks, and I can just go for a shore dive down to like 20, 30 feet, and it's totally fine.
So your starting kit is the one that gets you, right? But the rest, once you have your equipment, and you're good. It'll be cheaper to go.
Correct. And it depends at the level you're wanting to do, right? So like
Right.
locally here, like for a diver, if they were to get into the sport for maybe like $2,500 US dollars, you could get certified, you could get an entry-level kit, and you can dive during the summer to a max depth of like 60 feet. Now, if you're trying to dive year-round, you're trying to go to 200 feet in the Great Lakes, which is like what I'm certified to at the moment, and you're diving these shipwrecks, and you've got to have redundancy and all this extra equipment. Like when I do a deep decompression diving the Great Lakes, if I was to go down right now between my dry suit, my computers, my regulators, my BCD, my additional cylinders, I'm probably wearing close to like $24,000 worth of equipment. So
it gets pricey.
But I've slowly worked it. But I've worked it up over the last 10 years. And if you buy, there's a big slogan in the industry: if you buy right, you buy once, right? Just like camera equipment, right? You buy a good camera, it's going to last you to work, and upgrading and having to buy cheaper quality stuff to start and then having to upgrade it later on can make this sport significantly more expensive than it has to be. But I've definitely worked my butt off the last 10 years, working multiple jobs, and kind of working in the industry does help give me a bit of a benefit, obviously. However, the dive shop that I work for, we do trips abroad, usually once a month. So sometimes those trips are discounted, sometimes they're not. And it's really hard to not blow the majority of my income on these awesome dive experiences, because I always have the opportunity to do them, right? Sometimes I have to really say to myself, like, oh, it'd be really cool to go to Mexico next week, but I kind of need to pay rent this month.
So which is it? Am I going to have somewhere to sleep or travel right now?
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's why, especially in the higher ends of diving, like the average age of people that do the type of diving I do is actually kind of 40 plus. And it's often these people that have these established careers, usually in these larger cities. They have a lot of vacation time. They've got a lot of expendable money. And for them, it's kind of like an extreme hobby or something for them, right? So for me, I'm a bit different because I got into it so young. Like I started diving when I was 18. I started working at the dive shop that I work for now, which is called Dan's Dive Shop. I started working there when I was about 18, just a couple weeks into my course. And then after a few years, I was like, you know what? Like I really want to turn this into a career. I don't really want to leave the dive industry. So at that point, I started working myself towards becoming a recreational professional, which is like a dive master that allows someone to guide certified divers and help refresh certified divers. You can then move your way up to a recreational instructor. So that's where I'm at now as far as instructing goes. So I can teach quite a few of the different levels all the way up to dive master, which was that first level I had mentioned there. Right. And then to move past that, because the recreational limit is 130 feet. So that is, anytime you talk to like a vacation diver or a recreational diver, they're always diving single tank cylinders. They're in what's called open water, which means there's no hazards above them. And they're staying within what's called their no decompression limit. So that is the amount of time you can spend underwater before you have mandatory decompression. So like a tourist diver or a recreational diver, if there's an emergency, they can just swim straight up, right? They're shallow enough. They're not staying down long enough that they have obligated decompression. So if there's an emergency, it's pretty easy for them to get themselves out of that. Once you start to go past 130 feet, you start to get into the world of technical diving. And that is where the risks and time that you spend underwater starts to ramp up exponentially. And if I am doing a decompression dive to 200 feet, for example, and I have 45 minutes of decompression, any emergency we run into underwater, we have to be able to manage and control while we're still doing those 45 minutes of decompression, because that decompression is not optional. Like if you skip your decompression, you're going to get what's called the bends or decompression sickness, or a whole other slew of.
Is that where you pass out, right?
You can pass out. Can pass out. So kind of a quick description of what the bends is or decompression sickness. So right now we're breathing 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen. Okay. Right. That's what we're breathing right now, you and me here on the surface. Now, Our body uses oxygen, but our body does not use nitrogen. So as you go deeper underwater, every atmosphere of pressure, which is 33 feet, the ambient pressure around you starts to increase. Now, water does
Okay.
not compress, but air does compress. So, for example, our
Oh,
body stays the same
I
size.
swear I was thinking that the water was squeezing you this whole time. So
It
it's
is
not
and
the
it
water?
isn't. It's kind of it is and it isn't. Like, so it is the water squeezing you, but the water doesn't squeeze your body because our body is mostly made of water, right?
Okay.
So like humans in a sense can go actually very deep, but the thing that messes with us the most is that pressure on the air that we're breathing. So for example, the volume of our lungs would stay the same per breath, but the density of the gas will increase. So at 33 feet, the gas I'm breathing is twice as dense as it is here on the surface. So if I'm breathing 21% oxygen on the surface, if I go down to 33 feet, it's equivalent to breathing 42% oxygen per breath.
Now,
And if
does that mean that the lower you go, the air in your tank changes, or was that what the kind is doing?
it can, yes. So that's correct. So on the surface, like if I have my mix set at 21%, as I go deeper, every atmosphere that is changing, and there's different limits to the gases for different tolerances. So as I mentioned there, like per breath, the oxygen is increasing. So
Right.
that can also happen with the nitrogen. And because our body doesn't use nitrogen, our body has to store that excess nitrogen. So if I'm breathing in 140% or 200% nitrogen per breath compared to the normal tolerances I'm experiencing here on the surface, my body is going to store that nitrogen gas in my tissues. And if you were to come up too quick, it's very similar to what happens with a pop bottle. So if you have a bottle of pop and the lid is closed, the CO2 inside your pop is dissolved into the water and it looks completely flat.
A
But
soda
when
bottle
you
for those on this side,
yeah,
because I call it a
sorry, a
soda
soda
bottle. I
bottle.
got
Yeah,
to
correct. Yeah,
specify for some.
that's right.
No, it's okay. It's
So a
okay.
soda bottle. So when you crack the lid and you start to release the ambient pressure inside the bottle, all the CO2 in that pop will then start to come out of solution and it'll start to fizz and create those bubbles.
Right.
That's what can happen with the nitrogen in your bloodstream and muscles. So for example, if I was to go down to 200 feet and I was to spend an hour down there and all of a sudden I snap my fingers and I'm at the surface, your blood and tissues are going to start to foam and become fizzy, which can start to pump air bubbles through your bloodstream, which can cause you to lose consciousness. It can cause pain. It can cause livers and other organs to start to shut down. And that's where the risk of decompression sickness or the bends comes from. So it's that excess gases that we're not, because we're being exposed to just so much more gas than we're used to here on the surface. Our body just doesn't know where to put it. And that's what can limit how long you can spend underwater. So like a recreational diver can go to 100 feet on air for, let's say, 25 minutes, right? I believe if I was
Right.
to grab my table, that'd be about the time that you have to stay within your no decompression limit. So if you're at 100 feet within that 25 minutes, there's an emergency, you can swim to the surface and not really worry about there being an emergency. However, if I am at 200 feet, that time might only be 2 or 3 minutes before that happens. So for example, like looking back at the deepest dive I did last year was to 200 feet.
Okay. That was
And
my next question.
yeah, so our dive plan, for example, was 20 minutes at 200 feet, and that gave us 45 minutes of decompression. So we were at 200 feet for 20 minutes, and that gave us 45 minutes of decompression. So total dive was 65 minutes. Now, when you plan these dives, you also have to plan for emergencies. So we have what's called an overplan. So if we were at 200 feet, we were down there for 20 minutes and my buddy started to have an emergency, we got delayed, and all of a sudden we've been down there for 25 minutes. We need to understand what that's going to do to our decompression. So for example, our average plan was 45 minutes of decompression with 20 minutes bottom time, but our overplan with 25 minutes of bottom time doubled our decompression to an hour and a half. And
Okay.
that's where the danger of technical diving comes, because a recreational diver going past their no decompression limit doesn't necessarily understand that the amount of time it takes to come up safely will go exponentially because your body just keeps on gassing faster and faster and faster. So in technical diving, for both cave diving and technical decompression diving, we have what's called a ceiling. A ceiling is, in a cave, it's a physical ceiling, like you just can't go up. But in open water, we have to call it a theoretical ceiling, which is a barrier that we cannot pass, regardless of what shit's going down underwater. Me as a diver, if I want to come up safely from this dive, I need to handle any emergency that we're running into and deal with it during that whole decompression.
Right there.
And it's pretty cool. It can be really sobering sometimes, especially going through the training, because we do run through a lot of rescue scenarios and different things like that. And there is a risk to this level of diving, but when done properly and when planned properly and when trained properly for it, all of the main risks have solutions, right?
Okay.
So you just got to be prepared for it, right? It's kind of like the building code for you and a constructor. Like if you follow the building code, your house or structure is going to be sound. But if you start to cut corners in the building code, right, something's going to happen. There's a reason that you need to have 2x4 spaced X amount, right? Like that's kind of all. That's how it all kind of plays together. So it's cool. I really do enjoy what I do, and I like being able to share a lot of that video and those really exciting things with a lot of like you guys on TikTok and social media and stuff like that.
Right.
And then again, I'm really working towards trying to help inspire a new generation to get into diving, and especially to get into this cool level of diving.
Right. It's awesome because I could tell you're having fun the way you talk about it. It's like you explain it with details and all your feelings you put into it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, man. So like it's really, really cool. And like here in the Great Lakes, so like you've got salt water around you, right? And salt water's cool, don't get me wrong. Like I love, like I said, in your neck of the woods, I've dove with great whites and the kelp forest and the sea lions and stuff. But
I can't say the same, and I've lived on this side, but it's cool that you came to this side of the world to do it, you know. That's awesome.
Exactly, right?
But I'm wondering, you said you dove into that area where there's a lot of kelp that it looks like a forest of kelp?
Yep, correct. Yep.
How scary is that? You had to be scared of that. Come on. You can't tell me something. I've seen videos of that, and I get scared.
You know what was more scary when we went was before I did that great white shark trip, and I had heard, especially in the South Pacific, like on the outer walls of those kelp forests, sometimes you will get great whites kind of cruising by. So I'm not going to lie, the thing I was most concerned of diving in the kelp forest was looking like past the forest into the open ocean and just looking to see if there was like a shark just kind of cruising by, right? That was kind of the
so you're safe. In the forest of kelp, you're safe essentially.
For the most part, yeah. Really, all that's going to be in there, like around there's like you get like octopus, you'll get the sea lions, you'll get a lot of different types of like fish and eels, but there's really nothing that's going to harm a diver. And even that being said, too, sharks really aren't any real danger to a diver. You got to remember, a shark is think of a shark compared to like a bear, right? So
curious.
Sharks see us in the water. They are curious, but when a shark sees us in the water, our regulator, for example, is really loud. The mechanical mechanism of the sound of it breathing and the bubbles and stuff. A shark looks at us more as a machine, like a human man-made machine, like a boat, compared to another fish or aquatic animal. So
how do they confuse them with what is it, seals? How do they? Oh, those are
So in the surfing, so sharks can sense like movement, and they can smell things from a distance. But sharks at the end of the day actually don't have really great eyesight. But especially in clear water, they do use their eyesight quite a lot. And another thing too, when a shark goes to bite, they actually roll their eyes back in their head, so that way if something was to claw at their face, they don't damage their eyes. So sharks are pretty much blind when they go to bite. But for example, the reason surfers sometimes will get hurt from sharks is they are usually surfing in high waves, which means underwater the visibility is like zero. So the shark can sense there's something there, but they can't see what it is. And when a surfer is laying on their board on their stomach and they're paddling with their arms on the side and they're kicking with their legs, they actually give the silhouette of a seal.
That's all they see, the silhouette.
That's correct. So a shark will think like, oh, maybe this is a damaged seal up there. They'll bite, they'll have
free
their
meal.
Eyes closed. Pretty much. And anytime you see a shark that has a survivor that has like just the big jagged kind of like half moon teeth marks across their torso, that's pretty much an example of a shark biting and instantly letting go because it realized that wasn't what it wanted. If a shark wanted to eat them, it would have just bit right through them. We're really
easy,
not
right?
that shark. Yeah. So
like a watermelon, like a walking watermelon.
Yeah. So pretty much any of those people that survive a shark attack, that was actually the shark pretty much letting them go. As
Okay.
much as they might want to say they fought off the shark, really it's just the shark was like, oh, this isn't what I want, and then he just chose to swim away.
But it sounds good to say you fought a shark, though.
Sure,
But I mean, it sounds
good.
even better to say you survived a shark attack, right?
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, like in the ocean, like I definitely do have a bit more fear in the ocean than diving here in the Great Lakes. Like going down to the kelp forest for the first time, like you can sometimes in those dive sites, like you can hear about it and you can do your research beforehand, but nothing will really prepare you for what it's like down there. Do you know what I
Obviously,
mean?
the personal experience is what makes the experience.
Correct. So for me, like I was pretty experienced at the time that I was diving there, so I felt okay. But I have done some diving off of British Columbia, so on the west coast of Canada there, and we have a lot of orcas. And I'm not gonna
Oh,
lie,
okay.
I am more afraid of orcas than I am great whites.
I heard
And
they're
that's because
I heard they're assholes, right?
oh, they're assholes, and they're pack hunters too. They play with their food, like they're like those are the ones that you don't want to mess with.
You want to
Whereas
keep
like
them
great
away.
whites, like they're yeah, like sharks are really phenomenal creatures because they're all about efficiency and safety. Like they'll measure the risks before they attack something because a shark knows if it gets damaged in the wild, it's dead, it's
That's it.
gonzo.
Yeah. Okay.
So sharks can go like a month without eating, and they will often only eat sick or wounded prey. They really don't like to go after a healthy fish
Why isn't
if they
it?
don't need
Why
to.
isn't it the same thing with orcas? Like if they
I
get
think
injured,
because
they're dead.
I think because they're pack hunters. They kind of work they kind of work like a wolf,
That's
right? Like
right. Okay.
if you've ever seen it where there's like a seal on an iceberg and stuff, you'll get this one orca that will like jump up and actually like hit the iceberg in a sense and knock the seals off into the backwater, and behind them is where the whole pack of them all start to come up and
Just
go at them.
waiting for it to fall
So
in the water.
yeah, they're just a lot more of an aggressive creature, and they're more about yeah, they're more about just kind of feeding, and they're also a lot smarter in a sense too. Like dolphins and orcas have a really high intelligence, so they know how to play with their food sometimes,
Hmm.
whereas a shark won't play with the food. A shark really isn't that smart. Like they are smart, but they're not. But a shark hasn't been shown to ever play with their food, whereas an orca will be just a dick and it'll just play with its food even if it's not hungry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do like the Great Lakes because we don't have any sharks. We
Yeah.
don't have any
That's
sharks. We
better.
don't
I
have any
mean,
orcas.
what
We
about catfish? Like giant catfish? You guys have like ginormous catfish up there too?
you do you'll get catfish, carp. Carp is another one. Muskie. The biggest one that you'll get here in the Great Lakes is sturgeon. I
Oh.
don't know if you've ever seen a sturgeon, but sturgeon are like a large prehistoric fish,
Okay.
and
Yes. Yes.
there's Fraser River salmon, which if you Google sturgeon, you'll see ones that come out of BC where they're like 14 feet long.
That
Those
is
are specific to that
big.
region. Here in the Great Lakes, we do get big ones, not quite the full 14 feet. They're about 10 feet, but they look like an alligator, and they're pretty cool. You don't necessarily see them a whole lot. You'll see them sometimes if you're in the middle of the lake because they're like a midwater fish.
Right. Could they attack you
But
while you're diving?
no, they're like catfish in a sense. They're just
Oh.
sucker
Okay.
fish. They
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
Yeah, there's really no predators in the Great Lakes
They kind of
that would
look
affect the
scary
diver.
though. Those sturgeons.
It, they can be scary, right? And
Like
at the end of the day, you don't know what the hell's down there, right? There's a chance that nobody's fucking seen what's about to come at you. So when you're down there and you're especially like I have my solo diving certification, and it's really interesting. Like when I dive with a friend, I'm pretty fearless. Like I'll dive down to a 200-foot shipwreck in the pitch black with a buddy. I'm leading, my buddy's behind me, but I feel fearless, right? Like I'm really not worried about it. But if I'm diving in 30 feet by myself in a waterway that I've dove 100 times, shadows still start to play with my mind, right?
You're
Like just
right.
imagine just going hiking at night, right? Like you know a spot that you've hiked it 100 times during the day, but you decide to go there at night with your flashlight. You know what the wildlife is. You know there's nothing there, but psychologically it really starts to play with
I
you,
saw
right?
a ghost. I saw a demon run.
Yeah, what is that? What is that? Like I don't know. I like the biggest jump scares I've ever had underwater have been my mind psychologically like, oh, what was that shadow? What was that? And then all of a sudden I turn the corner and it's just like a bass like right in my face. But it's just like a little thing. It's
Just a
just a
little
jump
one,
scare.
right? Enough
Yeah,
to
it's just
scare
a
you
jump
though.
scare, right? Yeah, they do, and it's really psychological, and that's one of the biggest things with diving. No matter what level of diving you're doing, it does take a bit of psychological prep to visualize the dive, visualize handling emergencies, and then seen through to completing it safely, right?
Right.
But what I was trying to say there was like I still really prefer the Great Lakes, no matter where I dive in the world, whether the West Coast or anywhere in the world. Really, I always like to come back to the Great Lakes, and that's because here we have shipwrecks. So in salt water, if wood sinks, it'll rot away in about 50 to 100 years, and it'll start to fall apart.
Oh, wow.
But in freshwater, it's perfectly preserved. So, for example, like a 5-minute boat ride from where I live, we have a 200-year-old shipwreck sitting at the bottom of Lake Ontario, perfectly intact. And there's not a lot of places in the world that you can see such old shipwrecks perfectly intact. And going up places like Thunder Bay, in between Lake Superior and Georgian Bay there, and Lake Huron, you've got just these pristine shipwrecks in like crystal clear blue water that don't have any sort of fish or coral damaging them or anything like that. And there's just so much history in the Great Lakes.
Can you take stuff from there? Do people take stuff? I'm pretty sure they do, right?
They used to probably, but things are protected. So here in Canada, anyways, we have what's called SOS, which is Save Ontario Shipwrecks. They're the main agency that looks after it. But as long as a shipwreck is within Ontario waters, they are protected from looting. Most places like the US probably has that as well for within coastal waters. But once you start to get into international waters, then it kind of gets a little different. But for the most part, these shipwrecks here are protected. But yeah, there's estimated between.
How are they protected? I've seen a show where they actually go treasure hunting in the ocean.
So in that situation, they are in international waters.
Okay.
So they are in international waters. And if you are in international waters and you find a shipwreck, right, there is finder's fee laws, for example. So if I was diving in the Bahamas and I find a Spanish galleon, right, with $1 million worth of gold in it, if it can be proven exactly whose ship that was, like it belonged to Spain, right, then Spain has rights to that shipwreck. But you as the finder, I believe, are subject to like a 40% finding fee. So
come on.
Sometimes you'll see like yeah. So it's kind of one of those things. Like you do get these treasure hunters that will go out and they'll find treasure, but regardless of what they show on TV, legally, they're actually probably not keeping 100% of it. They have to give the majority of it back to whoever the original owners were, but they do get to keep a finder's fee in a sense.
And that 45% has to be that big for them to be out there with those big ships, I guess, right?
Correct. Yeah. Or they're making money from selling it as a TV show.
Or exactly. Right? Yeah.
There's a lot of situations like here in Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes. There's tons of organizations that find new shipwrecks every year. They're not making any money from it. They're doing it just to preserve the history and just the like to enjoy the hunt. And they have a lot of sponsors that are helping kind of fund that research and stuff. So it does really depend. But like in the Great Lakes, for example, there's estimated between 6,000 and 10,000 shipwrecks.
Wow. There's plenty to look around down there, right?
Correct. There's only about 4,000 total confirmed, and they estimate at least 6,000 to 10,000, and there's some people that even say there's close to 20,000.
They're only scratching the surface then, huh?
They're really, yeah, that's the thing. And every year they find these new shipwrecks in Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes that haven't been seen since they sunk in the early 1900s.
You know, that's crazy to me. They have a drone flying in Mars. They know more about Mars now than they know what's at the bottom of the ocean.
100%.
How is that?
It's crazy.
How is that possible? It's crazy because think about how many ships went through there before, per se. I don't know, before the history that we know of Christopher Columbus, right? Let's just go there. That's the history that we know. How many ships wrecked before them?
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like, there's so much. Actually, in the Great Lakes, in Lake Michigan, I believe it is. There's an underwater Stonehenge. That is from back when the water level was a lot lower, and it's dated back to like 13,000 years from like Native Americans. And there's even here in Ontario, there are some cottage lakes up north that the water levels have changed since then, and there's like Native American paintings below the water line that are dated back thousands of years.
I keep getting deeper, and before I forget my question again, we've already gone out of that subject, when you were talking about the pressure, I thought about those people that dive deep down, all the way down inside, where they do contests for them to dive down. Like, how do they do it?
Free diving.
Yes.
So free divers in a lot of ways actually have a bit of an easier situation than we do. So, for example, a free diver doesn't have to worry about how quick they go down or how quick they come back up. And this is because they are not on gassing additional gas, right? So they're starting with their main breath at the surface, and as they go down, that breath is just compressing, and as they come back up, that breath is just re-expanding. But if I was a free diver and I free dived down to 30 feet, took one breath from a scuba diver's regulator, and tried to swim back up, my lungs would actually pop because they'll expand to twice the size on the way back up.
They would literally pop.
Though, it's still, literally pop. It'll literally expand to twice its size. So you'll get what's called an air embolism injury, which more than likely it kind of pops like underneath your collarbone. It's not fun. It's not fun.
It sounds painful. My chest is hurting right now. You just mentioned it.
Potentially fatal. But like a free diver, it still takes them a lot of training and stamina to be able to hold their breath for the 6 to 7 minutes that they have to do to actually complete that swim up and down. But for them, free diving really just comes down to just them training themselves to manage their airways on the surface. The actual pressure in the water really doesn't affect their free dive itself. Like, you can practice how to hold your breath for 7 minutes at your desk, for example. Like, the way that you hold your breath for 7 minutes at your desk is the same way a free diver holds their breath for 7 minutes. The only difference is a free diver is also swimming, and it just happens to be going down and then back up. But the depth actually doesn't affect their dive in any way other than just the cool factor.
Oh, I know that. Right? That is pretty cool to be able to hold your breath that long. I can't even hold it for 30 seconds.
Yeah, I can't do that. I'm a diver for sure. I'm not a free diver. That's 100%. I have to teach the basic snorkeling and scuba, but that's it. That's it.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, I'm sorry I took us out, or we were talking. It was so interesting about the shipwrecks that are over there where you're at in the Great Lakes. So you were saying that there's the Stonehenges that they found.
Yep, correct. So it's in. You have to just look up Great Lake Stonehenge. So it's in. I believe it's in Lake Michigan. And it's it's not super deep by any means. I think it's like 60 or 80 feet, but there's a cluster of stones that you can tell are man cut and moved and set in a certain orientation. And the reason they were able to date it back as far as they did was on one of the rocks there is a very crude North American painting of a mastodon, like a really ancient kind of creature that used to roam in that area. So that kind of what helped dates it back to that 13 to 14,000 year kind of estimation of it. But the crazy thing is, like, and I always tell this to my students, especially here in Ontario, like we have a lot of lakes. I think we've got some of the most lakes in the world in a small area here. But especially when you start to go up to these like really northern lakes, there's a very real chance if you want to scuba dive at the bottom of that lake, you're probably the first human to ever lay his eyes on the bottom of that lake. Like, unless someone's dove there in the last 10 to 20 years, realistically,
nobody's ever seen it.
No one's ever seen the bottom of that. And like, as far as talking about like knowing more about space compared to underwater, the issue is like certain wavelengths get destroyed by water. Like, we can scan things with satellite, we can scan into the ground, and we can find these underground pyramids and stuff right now. But we really cannot scan water without having a what's called side scan sonar, which is like a device that you drag in the water and it's bouncing sound back and forth. And even that has a really, really poor resolution when you start to search really large areas. So that's why it's so hard to explore the oceans.
That makes perfect sense. See, that's how dumb I am. I couldn't even put that together, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of stuff in between the center and the bottom, and because things can be covered in mud and dust in a sense. Like, if I'm underwater, I can see that used to be a car, but on side scan sonar it might only look like a rock.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
That's another one too, right? So there's so much things that have been unexplored and not found, that it's really crazy when you follow the industry of how many new things are found and discovered every year. Including both oceans, the lakes, pretty much anywhere there's water.
It's going back cool. to the why they know more about it, and it's very dangerous to send a human or a life form down there, right? To look at what's going on at the very bottom of the ocean. It's very dangerous, wouldn't it?
It is. It's actually significantly different than going to space. So for example, like, have you ever heard of a rebreather?
No.
You ever heard that before? No? Okay. So in scuba, we have what's called open circuit and we have rebreathers. Open circuit is where when you breathe in and you exhale, your bubbles go to the surface, right? It's just an open circuit. So I'm breathing down my tank. A rebreather allows a diver to rebreathe their same air over and over again. And it
Okay.
works very similar to what an astronaut does in space. When they go for a spacewalk, they're using a rebreather because they have this system on their back, and they're basically rebreathing the same air over and over again. And there's what's called a CO2 scrubber, which will scrub the carbon monoxide out of their exhaled gas, and that way it's safe to breathe over and over again, right?
Okay.
Now, in diving, you can also use a rebreather, but in space, a rebreather, all the rules are, well, in space, you're in a vacuum. So there's no additional pressure. So they're dealing with 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen. That's pretty much it. It's not going to, there's no compression changing that. Whereas on a rebreather underwater, every 33 feet, all of your gas laws completely change. And diving at 66 feet compared to 266 feet is a completely different ball game. Like it's pretty, it doesn't sound like much, like that distance and the difference, and logistically it doesn't seem like there'd be much, but just the way that it affects your body and the way that those pressures start to affect your the gases, it's pretty crazy how different and how much more complex it is to do those deeper dives.
Right. And here I was thinking that the government found something in the ocean and they're trying to get everybody out of the planet, and that's why they stopped searching the oceans.
No, they got no idea what's down there. I'm telling you right now, they got no idea what's down there. Whoever, like, I feel like James Cameron and those people that dropped to the bottom of Marianas Trench, like those guys have balls, because like there's a real chance they could just drop down one day and get swallowed by like a whale. Like in the grand scheme of things, those little submarines that they're dropping in aren't very big, and like they have no idea what's down there. Like you could easily fall down on, like, granted at the bottom of the ocean, there's usually not enough food to support such a large life form, but you could probably drop down on a 100-foot squid.
But check this out. Okay, I was going to bring that up because I seen a video of a Russian oil rig, and I was talking about it to my friend the other day, and apparently they recorded a giant squid, and it's ginormous. But also I saw another one more recently where they show up a image of a shark. They say is a great white. No, not a great white. What's the giant one? The
Megalodon?
Yes, they say it's one of those. Now, to me, it looks like a shark. I'm no scientist, but I don't know. I fell for that one. What do you think?
So the two videos there. So the first one with the giant squid. So that one was filmed like maybe a couple years ago.
Right.
And believe it or not, that was the first time humans have ever got video of a live giant squid.
Right. So that's real.
Before that, that's real. And that just shows how new the ocean is to us. Like that's the first time we've ever seen one on camera.
And how long have we been here, right?
Exactly, right? And now going back to the second one, to the shark, I know which one you're talking about there. So sometimes those depends on the media outlets advertising it in a sense. So in the video that you're talking about, which is the one I think I saw, that was like it was like a Greenland shark, which is like they're really big sharks and they're really deep water living sharks, and they're massive. And Greenland sharks, I think the oldest one that they've ever tested was like it was like 500 years old. Like it was like they were able to do a test on, like they're one of the longest living creatures out there. But yeah, no, it wasn't a megalodon. They technically have not found any megalodons.
You know what? I didn't believe it because the video, you only get a glimpse of it. You don't really see it. But I thought I asked,
So in that situation, I'm pretty sure that was a Greenland shark. But those
makes sense.
Sometimes those footage of those oil rigs, those ROVs and robots going down to the bottom of those oil rigs, almost every time that those go down, they videotape a new marine life that we've never seen before.
That's crazy.
And like that's only showing like the common ones in that area, right? Like who knows how many not common like even in the forest, you know about these forests where they find a new species after hiking through the forest for 50 years in the same area. But imagine the oceans where we're only going down once a year at most in a couple spots, and it's just a really small snapshot of
Right.
what's living in that column of water.
Yeah.
And you really don't know what's else is out in the abyss.
Around what you can see.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's pretty crazy when you think about it, and it's pretty sobering too. Like it's pretty, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting
Right.
for sure.
There's
Sometimes I play with.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry I didn't catch it. I'm sorry,
Well,
I cut you off.
so that's okay. So what I was gonna say was sometimes it can definitely play with your mind. Like for example, we were out in Cuba a couple years ago, and we did a dive at it was the most southern part of Cuba. It was near Santiago de Cuba, and we went to do this wall, and the coral reef started at about 70 feet, and it went to the ledge at 90 feet, and it was a straight drop to 3,500 feet.
More.
And yeah, more straight down. And so we went down to about 150 feet on that wall, but like we had maybe 100 feet visibility at the start. So when we go over that edge, like you're looking at coral and reef and stuff, and you're looking out into the big blue abyss. And then when you swim over that rock edge, it is literally just black water underneath you.
Because you can't see past that, right?
You can't see past that, right? So you're literally like it's like floating on a cliff where you can't see the bottom. Right. And again, same thing, like knowing that it drops down to 3,500 feet. I don't know if anyone's ever been to the bottom of that 3,500 feet. They probably just know it just by radar.
Right.
Right.
When you were floating there, how did it make you feel? Did it make you feel small, or how did it make you feel?
Makes you feel small. It really does make you feel small. And that's one really cool thing I like about diving is just that how small we are in the grand scheme of things. Swimming beside this massive freighter that's sunken underwater and getting a chance to fly around this massive man-made ship makes you realize like how big these ships actually are, right? Because you're actually up close to it and you're trying to swim around it and you're like, this thing is massive.
Well, when I think of a ship, I think of a big truck, maybe like an 18-wheeler. That's what I think of, but it's not that, right?
No, I'm talking like ships, like the tiller one here that I was talking about, like it's 99 feet long. Wow. It's 99 feet long, and I think it's 22 or 25 feet wide. And it was a 3-mast schooner. And what
does that mean?
A schooner is a type of ship. So
okay.
It has similar ship construction to the War of 1812. So they assume it was built around 1820.
Okay.
For example. And it doesn't even it has a rudder arm instead of a ship's wheel. So a rudder is the big stick that they would push to move the rudder.
Oh, the little tail in the back?
Correct. So because it has a tiller arm compared to a wheel, it means it was built pre-1850 because they didn't even invent the ship's wheel until 1850. So this ship is older than that. But it's a big ship. Like these were like fur trading ships that helped colonize and pioneer trade between Europe and Canada and North America. Right. It's pretty crazy.
Right.
It's really crazy.
So we were talking about all these other sharks, but I kept thinking about another one that one. I know you do a lot of cold diving, right? Cold water diving. Yep. Okay, well, frozen. I mean, what is it called? Frozen diving? Is that what it's called?
There's ice diving.
Ice diving. I'm sorry. See, I don't even know the terms.
Yeah, that's okay.
I don't mean to insult you. I know. I get offended.
Frozen diving is the same thing.
Okay. All right. Well, what about belugas?
Belugas aren't. They're not really dangerous by any means. They're kind of more like a dolphin. In a sense.
But don't they look freaky though? Because I've seen pictures of them at the bottom, and it looks freaky.
Yeah, because they're really white and pale and stuff. And so here in the Great Lakes,
no, because of the shape, it looks like there's a human in a suit or something.
Yeah, they can be super weird looking for sure, especially from like underneath. So belugas are mostly found like really high up in kind of the Arctic waters in a sense there. So and I've never seen a beluga out in the wild, but I have seen them at different aquariums and things like that. But yeah, any big fish like that can definitely be, especially if you're not expecting to see it underwater, like anything like that'll freak you out because until you can identify it, you're like, what is that? And it depends on the diver, right? Like I've got experience enough that if I see something, for the most part, I have a good idea of what it is. But I've had students before like see this weird fish swim by and they look at me like, what the fuck is that thing?
That
Like
would be me.
yeah, like they just like got this look. They're like, should we run? Should we not run? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's just like a big catfish, and like that can be interesting. But there are times that like I see something, and I'm like, I have no idea what this thing is. I saw a beaver once underwater, scared the hell out of me.
I'd imagine it came out of nowhere. I bet, right?
Yeah, it's just one of those things you just don't expect to see, and it's like it just startles you, right? But no, it's cool, man. Like there's and no matter where you go in the world, like every area has different diving to offer. Like the ecosystem underwater can be completely different. Just like our forests and our jungles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like a jungle in South America is different than a jungle here in Northern Ontario,
Right.
or a forest in Northern Ontario, but underwater it's the same situation. Like you'll get different marine life, different vegetation, different water conditions, and it's just so unique everywhere you go. And there's so many people that just don't understand how cool it is underwater right in their backyard.
Or they don't even think about it.
They just don't even think about it. That's like here, saying that I'm a scuba diver in Canada and I dive the Great Lakes, people all the time, you see it on my TikTok all the time. People are like, what do you mean you dive the Great Lakes?
Well,
You're diving in Canada? Are you crazy? Like, what do you talk about? And like, yeah, the water can be cold, but as long as you're in the proper equipment and you're dressed for it accordingly, it's enjoyable. Like we wear dry suits and we've got our dry undergarments, but you can also pay to have heated undergarments if you really want to.
What?
And you can get a battery pack and a heated vest and stuff. That whole system will run you like another $4,000. But if you got the money for it, why not?
Yeah, right.
It's gonna help keep you warm.
Isn't that
right?
don't you get? Isn't that dangerous that you'll get cooked in there for some reason with the battery underwater?
So it has to be specific heated stuff for diving. So they have failures and safety stuff built into it. You are right now with different companies like DeWalt coming out with these construction or Milwaukee construction heated jackets, right?
That's what I was going to tell you because I've seen those.
I am hearing reports of divers buying those because they're way cheaper and doing a dive with them. But the issue is when their suit accidentally floods, they're getting shocked or they're getting electrocuted or they're getting burned.
Yeah, I figured they would.
And they're just not meant for it. Whereas, like for diving stuff, it really just depends what you're doing, right? Like if you're doing a shallow stuff, you could try it out maybe. But if I'm going to 200 feet and all of a sudden my electric vest starts shocking me, I can't come up for at least 45 minutes.
Yeah, that could be bad.
Like you gotta kind of take those. You gotta weigh the pros and cons.
But what was that saying you said at the beginning? If you buy it once, what was it?
Buy right, buy once.
Buy right, right there you go. That's a perfect scenario for that one too.
Exactly, right? Like you could spend a bunch of money on these like cheap heated systems that keep breaking on you and electrocuting you. But if you just bought the proper one the first time,
we need to buy it again.
Really long. Yeah, exactly. Or you can get higher end equipment can be like serviced and it's worth upgrading. Like I've got a lot of my equipment does need regular maintenance because I do about 300-400 dives a year usually.
Wow,
and I wear through my I do dive a lot and it wears through my equipment quite a bit, but a lot of my equipment is serviceable and it's actually worth upgrading.
Right.
And all of the brands in the dive industry are really cool. They're not your big factory big brands like Canon that just pumps out a bunch of cameras and they just throw their cameras out if you have issues with it, right? Like these are like my dry suit is a Diving Unlimited International. They're in California. They're in San Diego, and they make dry suits in-house from their own materials, and they make suits for people all over the world, and they make most of the dry suits for the special forces and public safety divers as well. But like my dry suit is worth probably about $5,500. It's worth more than my first 2 cars combined. But
that sounded like a lot.
right. For the longest time, actually even nowadays, the gear in my car is worth more than the car itself.
Wow.
But it's worth fixing, right? If I rip the leg in something, I can get it repaired and fixed, and it's gonna last. And as a diver, we also like to. Things can sound scary at first, but when you divide it over cost per dive, things can get cheaper when you look at it in that equation. Like I paid X amount for this, but I got 1,500 dives out of it. Divide the price by $1,500. Okay, that only cost me $1 to take on every dive, right?
Fair.
Like, it sucks. I got to replace my $1,500 flashlight, but you know what? It gave me its use of. I got my use out of it.
Right? I know. I was looking at the flashlights that you have. They're crazy bright.
They're pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about the water is, like on the surface, you have to be careful of your LED burning out, right? Like you can have a light on the surface that can run too hot. underwater, a lot of dive lights are designed to use the water to help cool them down. So a lot of dive lights, for example, actually tell you that you can't run them for more than 10 minutes on the surface because you'll actually melt the light head. They actually need that water to help keep them cool. And that is a reason why some of those dive lights can be so ridiculously bright or just really cool looking. Is they're just designed differently than a lot of our surface lights.
Pricey too, right?
They can be pricey. Yeah, they can range.
But it goes back to one buy it right?
Yeah, buy once, but you can range anywhere from $90 for a flashlight all the way up to like $2,500 for a canister light.
It's worth it,
but
though.
again, two different types of diving. Like if you're doing just recreational dives and stuff, you just need a handheld flashlight. Use the C-cell batteries.
Just a regular handheld light.
Correct. For me, cave diving, I have what's called a canister light. So I've got like a light head that sits on the back of my hand. I've got a cord which goes to a battery pack on my hip. And then I have a light, like a switch, and then it has a significantly longer run time. So if I'm doing these really long, deep dives, that light is actually rated to last me that entire dive, plus maybe another dive as well. So it just depends on the equipment. Like you get what you pay for.
Right,
So
exactly.
Like diving can be, I don't want to scare people by saying diving's so expensive because it is really cheap if you're doing just recreational diving in the summer. For example, super cheap. You can explore your backyard.
For you, it's that expensive because you're using it as a career, kind of like that's what you're going for, or more into.
Now that I've gotten most of my equipment and stuff, right, things have kind of balanced out a bit now. So my main incomes right now, I work at the dive shop pretty much full time. I also teach. I certify usually anywhere about 100 students a year, usually between different courses and different certifications. So that works out as a decent chunk of my income. And then starting as of the beginning of this year, so starting in January 2021, I am now, I've registered Moderndiver as a self-employed business as well. So
nice.
Yeah,
Let me give you one of these.
See, as a creator, this will help as well.
You made it.
Yeah, right. So all of my diving expenses now I can write off as business expenses. Yes. My teaching is contract already, so that kind of shows as a bit of an income. And then through social media, like I'm sure you know, social media can be expensive. If you're trying to get royalty-free music and different domain names and stuff, like there's expenses to keep a YouTube channel up, right?
Well, I haven't gotten that far yet. And where the path that you're walking to, that's my goal too. And that's why I'm doing this.
And that's the thing. This year, I really stepped it up to a new level, and that's why, like about a month or so ago, I launched a merch site as well. So I've got Moderndiver merchandise and stuff, and I've sold a decent amount of merch over the last month and a half, all the way to I've had some stuff go to I've had a lot of stuff go through the U.S. I've had stuff go to Canada. I had a hat go to the U.K. recently. Nice. I have a guy in South Africa asking me about shipping for some stuff. And so, yeah, I'm trying to really change it up a bit. And that's why I was totally fine jumping in on this with you.
I'm getting excited for you. Really, I am, dude. It's so awesome because, look, check this out. You're my first international podcast that I do. I've done with, cool. Yes, I was excited. I was actually nervous. I was telling my wife, I don't want to do it no more. I'm so nervous. I got to go to the restroom before I talk to him. I was nervous. I literally was.
I'm just an everyday guy, right? I just do cool shit.
Yeah, no, I know, but that's what I'm saying. It's cool because I've never talked to somebody that does something like this cool. Because you're stepping into a completely different world when you dive in there, and you're a different person for that, obviously. Because I like I said at the beginning, that looks scary, but I enjoy watching it.
Yeah, and you know, and it's cool. It's a good challenge. It's definitely challenging. It's not an easy sport for everyone. It's not all diving is for everyone, but I believe everybody can learn to dive, and there is a certain type of diving for everyone. A good example of this was we did a trip in the Bahamas a few years ago where we were on a 65-foot sailboat sailing around the Bahamas doing 5 to 6 dives a day. Nice. It's called the Blackbeard Cruise. It's like $1,100 US. Everybody should do it. It's so dirt cheap. It's like $1,100. You get to live on a sailboat for a week, gives you all your food, all your diving, and you're sailing around the Bahamas. Like that's an example of a really cheap trip. Like really cheap trip.
Well, compared to the other ones, yeah, that did sound really cheap.
so on that trip, like when we went to do it, there was this girl that when we got onto the boat, there was this girl named Sue Marie. She was from South Africa. She was about 78, 79. She'd been a diver for like 40, 50 years. And when we got there, that was actually her sixth consecutive week on that boat. I don't know. In her retirement, apparently she just goes to the Bahamas.
Nice. Good for her.
She was living goals, because like we would get to the dive site and the dive masters and stuff would give us all of our briefing, and like me and my dive buddy at the time, we'd plan to swim out as far as we can, explore stuff and all those kind of things. Sue Marie would she would get her gear on, she would swim directly underneath the boat, she would find a nice spot on the sand where she's not damaging any coral or marine life, she would lay on her stomach, she would rest her head on her elbows, and she would just look at a piece of coral with a big smile on her face for 40 minutes to an hour. She just sat there and just looked at the fish moving around this coral head, kind of like watching the bugs fly around a bush or something. She was
just enjoying her time there.
She was just enjoying her time. And that's an example of someone who was really old, like, I wouldn't say really old, but like older, who some people would think might not be physically fit enough to do really active diving, but she's still able to do this amazing dive and experience what she's doing experience what she wants to experience, right? Like, she's living her best life.
Now,
she was
right, definitely was. If she was just laying right there, just looking at the corals, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? And then, or there's divers like me that will throw 150 pounds of metal on my back and then crawl into really cold water and swim down into the darkness.
What is the fitness level required for that? For what you do?
Honestly, not much. Honestly, really not much. I wouldn't say I'm super fit by any means. I've got COVID pounds right now, just like everybody else.
Yeah, we all got them.
Ideally, I'd like to sit at like 180. I think I'm sitting like 200 right now. So,
oh, okay. You know, that's where I'm at too, so no worries. I think I'm like 220 right now.
But yeah, like I'm still diving. Like obviously stuff is heavy on the surface, but when you're in the water, it's weightless.
Oh, right? Okay. So, yeah, well, obviously you're floating in the water.
My tanks, like my tanks, my regs, my plate, all that kind of stuff on the surface weighs me about 110 pounds. And then underwater, if I'm doing a deep dive, I'm clipping additional tanks to me. And I'm doing that in the water because if I was to stand outside of the water with all those tanks and things attached to me, I'd probably easily be over 300 pounds.
Wow. Like, so you over 100 pounds of equipment?
Yeah, it can start to add up quite a bit. And then so there are certain times that you have to put that on in the water. But once you're fully in your equipment, other than that, it's all about efficiency underwater, right? Because if I'm breathing, if I'm exhausted and I'm breathing twice as fast as I normally do, I'm going to go through my air twice as fast.
Right. Yeah.
So we actually have to, we can actually calculate to the cubic foot how much gas we're going to breathe on a specific dive. And to do this, we have to calculate what's called our surface air consumption rate. So we do tests on the surface at a resting pace, breathe in a tank. How much cubic feet of air do we go through in 20 minutes on the surface? You can then multiply that by the number of atmospheres you're going down, multiply that by a factor of how much exertion you're going to give yourself, and you can get a pretty close, after doing a few dives and tracking it, you can get a pretty accurate expectation of, on this dive, I'm going to go through 180 cubic feet of gas. And then we have to plan for that accordingly. So it's all about efficiency, because if I'm planning for this dive at a resting pace, and I start to exert myself, or I'm not, and I'm working myself up, or even your nerves, like if you start to get nervous down there and you start to breathe really frantically, that can shorten the dive altogether, because you just start breathing through your air. And if we're supposed to have X amount of air left at a certain point, if we start to dip into that emergency gas, like no questions asked, dive's done. We got to start heading back up early, right?
Okay, time to go.
You don't necessarily have to be fit, but you have to be generally healthy, but at the same time, you really have to work on keeping your breathing under control, mm-hmm. and not letting yourself get nervous or exhausting yourself. So it's all about practice.
Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. Like I mentioned, I dive a lot and I do a lot of stuff all over, but 70% of my dives throughout the year are diving in the same waterway near my house, which is an old canal. And it's in max 30 feet of water. Visibility is usually 10 to 15 feet. It's nothing special, but I'm out there practicing or filming for Moderndiver or teaching. And it's practice. It's all practice, right?
Right.
And that's what helps me stay with it. But yeah, you don't need to be super fit by any means.
All
I've
right.
tried to get into gym routines many times, and I usually just fail. I
But
usually
you're
after a
but
week
you're
or two.
doing a lot of workout diving in the
True.
water with all that weight on you. Do you I
Well,
for if I were to judge it, I'd say you're doing enough because you're always active.
yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like I'm not sitting at home, and it's mostly in the legs. Like I've been told I've got cyclist legs
There you
because it's
go.
all in the finning. It's all in the finning, right? Like it's
Yes,
I'm
yes.
using a lot of muscles there and stuff, but the don't have a whole lot of upper body strength, and my core is definitely not as healthy as it could be. But it gets the job done.
But you're healthy enough to get down there.
Correct,
That's
correct.
good. That's good to
And
hear.
yeah, and I'm still pretty young. Like I'm 28. I'm not sure if I mentioned that or not. I'm
No, you did, but
28.
I figure you were around there, around my age. I'm 30. I'll be 31
Oh, okay, yeah,
in the
perfect.
next month.
Oh, nice, very good. The so yeah, I'm still and like I got into it when I was 18, so I've been in it for about 10 years now,
Oh,
and like I
okay.
said, I yeah, so like that's what's helped me quite a bit. Is I finished high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and then I kind of got into diving on a whim, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stick with this, and I spent a lot of my early 20s kind of diving and traveling, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna turn this into a career. So then I started to work towards becoming a dive master and an instructor, and then now turning Modern Diver into a business. I'm just again trying to make sure I can keep myself in the dive industry, but make money while being in the dive industry to afford this really expensive diving because
And,
majority of divers around me are working like 100K a year jobs in Toronto.
wow.
And I'm not anywhere near that, but I'm keeping up with them with the
You'll
gear
be
and
there
stuff.
though. Keep going, and you'll get there eventually. And,
Right?
hey, and I'm
Or
following
they,
right behind you. Trust me, I'm following right behind you.
right, exactly. Or they, but you know what, too? Like, there's a lot of even working with people, like as an instructor, like during the summer with COVID, it's a bit weird because we can't do groups. We've got a lot of restrictions here in Ontario.
That's what I was gonna be
But
my last question for you, but I didn't know how I should ask it. I was like, how am I gonna ask this question? I don't want him to
yeah,
think
that's okay.
I want to talk about that. But
Yeah,
my
no,
main
no,
subject
that's okay.
was your diving. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. But
Sure.
given the nature of how things have been happening, things been happening over there. With I mean, at least from what I'm seeing, because what I'm seeing here could be completely different than what you're actually going through.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
how real are the shutdowns?
They're real. They're pretty real.
Okay.
We've got so we're in Ontario here. We're in a shutdown at the moment, and
But what does that mean, though? What does it mean? Because like
so
when they say shutdown, it just sounds scary overall.
so we are in a shutdown slash stay at home order. So we are not supposed to leave our houses for anything that is considered non-essential. Now, essential could be going to work. However, all non-essential retail, so grocery stores and pharmacies are allowed to be open, but they can
Okay.
only have 25% capacity inside. So there's like a lineup out the door, or like a line. There's like a lineup outside that's spaced 6 foot apart.
Right.
But all non essential retail at the moment has to be closed for curbside pickup only. So our dive shop is only open for a couple hours every couple days because we go there and people are doing curbside pickup, but we can't let people come in store and try on wetsuits or look at
Mm,
stuff like that, right? So we are
okay.
in a lockdown in that sense, right? So a lot of retail things are limited. They have a restriction right now on group sizes. So outside, you're not allowed to be in a group larger than 5 people from no more than 2 households. So that's a tight limit there. They've got these new quarantine procedures for flying into Canada. So if you want to fly into Canada, there's only 3 airports in the country that are allowing international flights. When you
Okay.
land
Keeping
in
it tight.
Canada,
Wh-
you have to have a negative test before you arrive, and then once you arrive in Canada, the government does another COVID test, and then they send you to a hotel for a 3-day quarantine while you're waiting for that test to come back, and then they send you home to then quarantine at home for an additional 2 weeks.
Could you
Now,
like go to the park if you wanted to?
yes, until this current lockdown. This current lockdown now they've started to shut down outdoor spaces again. Like we are as of this week, we are at the peak. We are at a peak right now.
So it came back.
We're
It came back over again.
It came back hard. Yeah, we're getting hit really hard by the variants. So we're really getting hit by
Okay.
the UK variant, the Brazilian variant, and then I just saw today they're starting to catch this Indian variant now from India all around us as well, which is like that now they're calling that the double mutation or something. I don't know. It's not pretty.
Wow.
But Canada and the thing too with Canada, like Canada's a massive country, right? Like we're really, really big, but we're population wise, we're only a tenth of the US, like
Hmm.
super small population. And a really interesting thing is uh 80% of the Canadian population lives within 2 hours from the Canada US border,
Oh, okay.
like within a 2 hour drive. So we're really heavily populated in the small areas in a sense. So like here in Southern Ontario, the majority of our population is in like a 2 hour driving window bubble. And that's where we're just, it's, yeah, like it
It's just
is, we have,
concentrated there now.
correct, yeah. And like I'm near Toronto, which is like the hub. Toronto's like, we're definitely like the worst spot in Canada for it at the
Okay.
moment.
Did you get sick
But
last year around?
sorry?
Did you get sick with it last year around, or you were
No,
fine?
no, I've been pretty good myself. I've been okay there, but it is we are in a pretty shitty spot at the moment. Like I know our local hospital recently just said today that they were at like 105% ICU
Gee.
capacity, and Ontario as a whole has started to build some triage hospitals outside and stuff. And um, yeah, it's not great. We're definitely we didn't get many cases from the original OG COVID, but
Okay.
now that these variants are out, that's started to spike us quite a bit.
Okay. Well,
Um,
hopefully things get better within the days that are coming, man. Because it's
exactly right, and for me, it changes some things. Like I'm not doing as much abroad trips, like that Great White Shark trip in 2019. That was the last time I was on an airplane. But last year I still got in as many dives as I normally do. I just did more of them in my own backyard, and it gave me more time to explore those Great Lake shipwrecks.
oh yeah,
And this year is going to be the same, right? I don't have any abroad trips planned, but I've got a lot of plans to dive these really cool shipwrecks I haven't seen yet.
right.
So I've got enough stuff to keep me occupied in my area that I'm okay hunkering down for a little bit here, but right now we're just really delayed on our vaccine rollouts as well. Like I won't it doesn't sound like I'll get a first shot of vaccine until probably end of June, early July.
Okay.
'Cause we're really slow on the vaccine rollout, but that's also because we just don't manufacture any here, right? We're
Right,
just
right, right.
we're
Yeah, makes
smaller
sense. Why
company
not?
in a sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's okay. Well, at least you've gotten your business going, which is awesome,
yeah,
despite that everything that's happening. But that's good to hear, man. And
yeah. And you know what, the government's pretty solid here too, like with if you're laid off due to COVID or making less than 50% of what you made last year, the government gives you $1,800 a month. um
nice.
so they're paying us to sit at home, so that's like I really can't complain too much about that. And
Okay.
we've also got the free healthcare on top of that too, so
Right.
it's the government's doing the best they can to take care of us, and it's not, if you do get sick here, at least it's not such a worry. It kind of gets really scary when you see some of those reports coming out of the U.S. of somebody leaving the hospital with a $50,000 COVID medical bill.
Yeah.
Like that won't happen to us here in Ontario. That won't
That's the
happen at
beautiful
all.
thing about Canada, right? Like
Yeah,
no
yeah.
hospital bill coming home with you.
No, no. Granted, our hospitals are really small, and it takes a long time to get anything done, but there are some benefits to the
It
universal health care.
it's a balance thing that they do. So I mean, we got to work with what we get wherever we're at. And
Pretty much.
I mean, I mean, I can't be. I don't even know if it's the right thing to say, but I don't want to sound like I follow what they say to the teeth. But when you
Mhm,
listen to scientists say that this is what could be done to help
mhm,
out, then that's what I
mhm.
think should be done because I don't know what the hell they're talking about, and I'm assuming they're giving me the right information. And then it comes with that
Yep,
too, like, are they really giving you the right information? And you just never know. So I just take it for what I see around, and around me, I see that everybody's fine, like they're okay because they're keeping away from everybody. Then okay, then that's what I'm
yep,
gonna do too.
yep, exactly. And that's how it is here. Like for the most part, people trust the officials, and they're pretty good. It's just for us, we really got shot in the foot because we did a good job keeping the OG COVID under control, and it wasn't too bad. We got out of that. But then, and we had a bit of a spike kind of around Christmas, which was to be expected as we went into the winter. So Christmas, this past Christmas. And then we went into shutdown again, kind of January, February, and then we got pretty much all of our daily cases under control. And then starting around March, they started to open things back up again. But it gave people this kind of false sense of security. And unfortunately, within 2 months, the UK variant and variants have spiked us so much that we're now like breaking like almost every day right now is a record breaking day for us for hospital administrations, deaths,
You,
COVID cases.
you
Like
think it's
it's
because
just record days.
you think it's because people didn't build the herd immunity? That's why it's getting hit harder now.
Yeah, and especially because too, like when we first started this whole lockdown, maybe a couple weeks ago, Ontario only had 2 to 3% of our population vaccinated.
That
Like
didn't
we're
help, right?
like the like even as a whole, Canada right now is only at 13%, 13-14%, whereas the US, I think I saw you guys are at 25% fully vaccinated.
That's
I'm
what I
only talking
hear.
about yeah, I'm only talking like 13% for like first shot. Like we're really, really behind. It's supposed to ramp up. They keep telling us that 70% of adults by June will be able to have their first shot, but it's not estimated to get your second shot until September. So that's kind of an issue with us is where it snowed today. It was really cold today too. We had
Snowing.
what 6 inches of snow today. So right now a lot of things are inside. So there's not patio season, right? Like restaurants can't have people on the patio socially distancing. They have a bunch of people inside. So then cases spread.
So in a sense,
So
the lockdown kind of makes sense because just keep everybody away from the snow.
yeah, unfortunately, in this situation, I think the lockdown makes sense, and
Right.
hopefully by June or so, things will open up, kind of like it did last year.
Yes, we
But
can only hope. But hey, keep working on what you're working on because
yeah,
I
man,
got excited, man, just knowing that you're doing what I'm planning on doing as well. And
for sure.
go ahead and plug all your YouTube, your TikTok, your Instagram, and all that good
Sure,
stuff that
sure.
you got, and then we'll go from
Of
there.
course, of course. So yeah, like I said, I'm most active on TikTok at the moment. That's my main platform. I'm just coming up on 140,000 followers, and I'm probably going to do another giveaway at about 150,000. So last time we gave away a mask and snorkel kit and some fins.
Nice,
They went to a guy in Ohio actually. So yeah, if any of
beautiful.
your listeners definitely follow along on TikTok and sign up for that because you might get some cool stuff.
There you go.
I've
Sign
got
up.
Instagram, YouTube, and stuff. YouTube is my long term goal, so I'm starting to do a lot more production on YouTube. I've started some vlog style videos, and I'm going to do some more training videos and stuff. But those are kind of my main platforms and stuff. My Linktree will also bring people back to the site, which talks about my training. If anybody is listening to this in Southern Ontario and wants to learn to dive from me, that's definitely an option. So my site will link them back to my work and kind of talk to you about how that all works. But yeah, man, that's where I'm at, and yeah, I'm just trying to share my adventure online for you guys who are all stuck on your couch like me.
Yeah, okay, man. I appreciate it, man. I love that. I appreciate it that you gave me the opportunity to talk to you and get to know you. And I hope that we
Yeah,
do
no
this
worries.
again in the future, man. Because
I would just
there's
mention that 100%. I'm totally fine coming on here again. If you've ever got questions or if you see me after the summer, I'll probably have some videos of some good expeditions during the summer. So in the fall, if you want to touch base again and talk about what cool things had happened this past year, I'm totally down.
definitely, I will definitely hitting you back up. I have your email now. That's what I was gonna tell. Yeah, I have
Yes.
it. I have it. So I'll keep in touch more with you through there. Because I know it was kind of hard to get a hold of you at first. I was like, oh, he
Yeah,
didn't
I'm not gonna lie,
answer.
man. I don't. I have Instagram because I have to. I really don't like it. So many people DM you through Instagram. It's ridiculous. People are like, and I don't check my messages very often on Instagram. So I'm like, oh, geez, people are messaging me.
Right.
But yeah, no, by far, like, email is the best way to reach me. But yeah, TikTok, YouTube, those are by far my most active platforms. And even if you DM me through TikTok or YouTube, any of those, I'll get back pretty quick as well.
All right. And with that being said, Chris, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, thank you so much for
So,
giving the opportunity. And I'll touch bases back with you in the fall, and we'll get into
perfect.
whatever you've been into and how your business is going. Because, like I said, I'm excited for you. Thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
it.
Awesome. Then one day I'll come down to California and I'll take you diving.
Oh, for sure. I'll definitely go. I'll take you on that. Trust me. I will take you on that.
No worries, dude. No
All right.
worries. Well, anyways, man, have a good one.
Thank you. You too. Be safe. Stay safe, man.
All right, you too.
All
Bye.
right. Wow. What an interesting conversation. It's so exciting. He built a business. He's doing the next. Well, I don't think that's the next step, but he's on to another step to where I'm from. He's doing awesome, and I'm excited for him. And I want to thank everybody for listening again. And here we go. We'll come back on Monday and have a happy weekend, everybody.